They dumped a mountain of trash into my private pond. Broken tiles, insulation, rotting waste, then called it community maintenance. So I gathered every filthy piece and returned it, right onto their pristine HOA gala under the spotlight. Let's just say they'll never forget the smell of justice. I've never been much of a people person. That's not to say I hate anyone. I just prefer birds over barbecues, frogs over fundraisers, and silence over small talk. That's why, 5 years ago, I sold my condo in Arlington, cashed out early from a job I'd grown to despise, and bought 12 acres of raw, peaceful land in central Virginia. It came with a battered old cabin and a dried-up pond that hadn't held proper water in decades. To most, it looked like a disaster. To me, it was freedom. And over the next few years, I turned it into something beautiful. The pond became my obsession. I cleared out trash, redug the basin, relined the shore with natural clay, installed a solar-powered aerator, and even stocked it with bluegill and largemouth bass. Ducks came back the second spring. A heron nested nearby. I built a small dock, strung solar lights in the trees, and even made a little bench at the edge where I could sit and pretend the world didn't exist. My house, rebuilt from the bones of the original cabin, was small, modern, and mine. No neighbors, no noise, and, importantly, no HOA. Or so I thought. Silver Pines was a development that sprouted up like a mold colony on the edge of my eastern property line. Cookie-cutter homes, fresh asphalt, vinyl fences, trimmed lawns, all the same exact shade of green like they came from some sad suburban printer. I watched the construction crews from a distance, sipping coffee on my deck while machines roared through the morning fog. At first, it didn't matter. Their land was their land, mine was mine. The lines were clear. But then came the signs, literal ones. Silver Pines Community, managed by the Silver Pines Homeowners Association, on bright white boards with gold lettering. Along with them, the slow creep of people who looked over my fence like they were evaluating a tumor growing on their property line. Then came the trash. It started subtle. A soda can on the road near my mailbox, a bag of fast food wrappers stuffed under a bush by the edge of my driveway. I figured it was kids or a careless jogger. I cleaned it up, didn't think much of it. But then the piles started showing up. Yard waste, broken bricks, old potted plants and cracked ceramic. And worst of all, bags, bulging, tied, and dropped right at the edge of the little gravel path that led to my pond. The first time I saw that, I walked the whole property line just to be sure I hadn't missed a new easement or sign. Nope. Still mine. Every inch of it. I checked the county GIS system just to be absolutely sure. Silver Pines ended a good 30 feet from where this crap was piling up. So I did what any rational adult would do. I printed out a sign, laminated it, mounted it to a cedar stake, and drove it into the ground. Private property. No dumping. Cameras in use. The next morning, the sign was face down, snapped clean in half. Something about that bothered me more than the garbage. The trash I could understand, people are lazy. But to break the sign? That felt like a message. I'm not paranoid, but I'm not stupid either. I installed a small motion-activated trail camera in one of the trees overlooking the path. It was the kind hunters use, silent, camouflaged, infrared at night. 2 days later, I had my answer. It was a white service truck with the HOA logo right on the door. Silver Pines Grounds and Maintenance Division. Guy in a bright orange vest. He backed up just past the county easement line and tossed out 2 full bags of what looked like sod and garden clippings right at the tree line. No hesitation. Like he'd done it a dozen times before. I emailed the video to the HOA's public contact address with a short message. Your maintenance crew dumped yard waste on my private property. Please cease immediately and clean up what's already there. Coordinates attached. Video available upon request. 2 days later, I got a response. A bland reply from Glenda M. that read, "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take community standards seriously and will review the matter with our maintenance vendor. Best regards." That was it. No apology. No cleanup crew. The trash stayed exactly where it was. In fact, the next week there was more of it, this time clearly construction debris. I pulled out a busted piece of drywall with Mason Family Master Bath scribbled on it in marker. Mason. Glenda Mason. The president of the HOA, if I remembered the name on that email right. Subtle. The next morning I heard a car roll up my drive while I was out front loading lumber into my truck. A silver Audi, blonde bob haircut, designer sunglasses. She stepped out like she was entering a showroom, not someone else's property. "Mr. Bennett?" she asked. "Yup," I said. I didn't stop what I was doing. "I'm Glenda Mason. I'm the president of the Silver Pines HOA. We've had some concerns raised by residents about the condition of your property." I didn't even blink. "My property?" "Yes. Some feel it doesn't align with the aesthetic values of the community. The pond, in particular, it's not fenced and it poses a potential safety risk. Also, your dock appears unpermitted." I set the wood down slowly. "Ma'am, I'm not part of Silver Pines. This land is independently zoned and was developed long before your subdivision existed. I'm not subject to your HOA. She gave me that tight smile I imagine she practiced in the mirror. "Of course I understand, but we still have an interest in maintaining property values in the area, and your parcel directly abuts our development. You have no jurisdiction here. Well, we're just trying to be neighborly. Perhaps we could work together to make some adjustments that would benefit everyone. Paint the house something more neutral. Remove the signs. Maybe landscape the pond edge to something less wild." "I like wild," I said, turning back to the truck. "And I'll keep the signs." That was the first time we met. It wouldn't be the last, not by a long shot. 2 mornings after Glenda's impromptu visit, I found a fresh pile of trash at the water's edge. This time it wasn't garden clippings or scrap wood. It was black contractor bags, heavy and bulging, some half submerged in the shallows of my pond. One of them had ripped open, leaking a nasty mix of pink insulation and rotting food wrappers into the reeds. A second bag had beer bottles clinking against jagged tile. Someone had clearly cleaned out a bathroom remodel and decided to celebrate by dumping it all in my backyard. I stood there in my boots, watching a frog try to swim around floating fiberglass. My stomach turned. This wasn't just a nuisance anymore, it was a straight-up environmental violation. And it was war. I didn't call the HOA. I didn't write another polite email. This time I went directly to the county's environmental department. After being bounced through 3 different voicemails and one guy who insisted I was probably looking for the Parks and Rec folks, I finally landed a call back from a field inspector named Shelley. She was polite, curious, and most importantly, not part of Silver Pines. We scheduled an on-site inspection the following Monday. Meanwhile, I retrieved the camera footage again. Sure enough, the same white service truck, same orange vest, had backed right up to the narrow maintenance road that cut through the trees behind my eastern boundary. They had no idea I'd set up a second camera near the dock last week after Glenda's visit. From that angle, you could see the trash actually tumbling out of the truck bed and rolling into the pond. I saved every frame. Monday came. Shelley showed up in a Blue County pickup with a clipboard and hip waders. I liked her immediately. She examined the trash piles, took photos, and tested the water. Her tone changed halfway through the inspection when she noticed traces of paint residue and oily runoff pooling near the bank. Did they dump this recently? She asked. 3 nights ago. Jesus. When she asked who I thought was responsible, I offered to show her the camera footage. Her eyes widened as she watched the truck back in, the HOA logo crisp and bright in the afternoon sun, the trash rolling out like it was trash day on private land. She said she'd escalate it to her supervisor. You might want to be ready for a hearing, she added. I nodded. I was more than ready. 3 days later, I received a letter from the EPA regional office. Yes, that EPA, saying they'd been forwarded evidence of possible illegal dumping on a natural water body. It wasn't technically a federal matter yet, but the State Department was taking interest. I couldn't help but smile. Let them squirm. But before any real progress could come from that, the HOA struck back. A packet showed up in my mailbox. Inside were color photos of my house annotated with sticky notes. Unpainted fascia. Dock may be structurally unsound. Standing water-breeding mosquitoes, and my favorite, improperly managed vegetation around pond perimeter. Alongside it, a letter from Silver Pines HOA stated that I was in violation of their community guidelines and subject to a fine of up to $500 per week. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the packet into the pond. I wrote a formal reply. To whom it may concern, I am not, have never been, and legally cannot be considered a member of your homeowners association. Any further attempt to enforce your bylaws on my property will be considered harassment. Kindly lose my address. I sent copies to the county records office and my attorney just in case. That's when things got weird. Neighbors from Silver Pines, people I'd never met, started walking their dogs closer to my boundary line, stopping to take photos. One woman crouched in the grass pretending to tie her shoe while aiming her phone directly at my dock. A man in a golf shirt and sandals pointed at my solar panels, muttering something to another guy who took notes on a yellow legal pad. A week later, I woke up to find a laminated flyer pinned to my mailbox. Urgent notice to community. Unlicensed pond structure and environmental danger zone. Residents are encouraged to report suspicious activity at the eastern property line. Silver Pines HOA cares about your safety. They'd gone public, painted me as some kind of swamp hermit squatting in a biohazard. I tore the flyer in half and went inside. At that point, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to wear me down, turn public opinion against me, maybe even build a case for some kind of forced easement or property seizure. All of it was bullshit, but it didn't have to be true. It just had to be loud enough, often enough to make my life hell. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. I filed a counter-complaint with the county, attached all my footage, drone stills, environmental reports, and copies of the flyers. I even included the annotated photo packet they'd sent just for fun. A friend of mine from college, now a land use attorney in Richmond, took one look at the case and said, "This is the dumbest HOA power play I've ever seen. But they're serious. So should you be." We started gathering everything. Every broken sign, every trash bag, every clip of Glenda's people trespassing. I logged it all, and then like flipping a switch, the trash stopped. No more dumping, no new flyers, no dog walkers with spy cameras. For almost 2 full weeks, everything went silent. That's when I heard about the gala. Apparently, Silver Pines was planning a massive autumn fundraiser. Black tie, live music, local politicians, the works. They were pitching it as a community leadership summit, hosted right across the street from my pond, in a rented event tent set up on HOA-managed common land. A pristine little park just off the main road. I found out about it through a real estate flyer stuffed into my mailbox. It had a photo of the pond, my pond, labeled Scenic Silver Pines Lakefront, Community Pride, Nature's Charm. That flyer sat on my kitchen table for hours while I stared at it in silence. Then I folded it once, then again, and set it gently in the trash. Ideas were already forming. The silence didn't last long. By the end of that same week, I found a white envelope taped to my mailbox with a gold HOA seal and my name handwritten on the front in aggressive cursive. Inside, an invitation to the Silver Pines annual autumn gala. The tone was syrupy sweet. We at Silver Pines cordially invite you to attend a celebration of community progress and shared values. Join us for an elegant evening under the stars as we showcase the best of what our neighborhood has to offer. They were holding the event 100 feet from my pond. My dock would be in view of every champagne flute and rented string quartet. The same body of water they'd been trashing for months was now a feature of their brochure. I stood on my porch holding the invitation like it might explode. For a moment, I was tempted to RSVP yes and show up in waders and a hazmat suit. Instead, I made a call to my lawyer, then headed back to the pond. The water was cloudy. Murky tan swirls ghosted across the surface, the result of sediment stirred up by God knows what. A pair of mallards paddled around sluggishly, and one of the lily pads looked half-eaten. I took a deep breath, crouched at the edge, and dipped a test strip. Still high levels of nitrate and turbidity. The chemical traces from the dumping hadn't flushed out. That night, I sent another email to the county environmental office. Shelley replied the next morning. We've reviewed the footage and received confirmation from our water quality team. Based on your location, your property is not subject to HOA oversight and qualifies for individual protection status under County Wetland Code. That was the first good news in weeks. I filed the paperwork immediately. By the next afternoon, the pond was officially registered as an independently managed water feature, meaning any unauthorized dumping or pollution now carried not just civil penalties, but criminal ones. I felt like I'd installed an invisible electric fence around the property line, but of course the damage had already been done. 1 week out from the gala, a light rain hit overnight. By morning, the banks of the pond had shifted. That bag of tile fragments from earlier had dislodged and spilled open completely. Shards of ceramic and chunks of grout now peppered the shallows like urban landmines. A bluegill floated belly up near the dock. I scooped it out with a net, held it in my gloved hand, and stared at the bloated body. The fish looked like it had suffocated in drywall dust. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't hurt, or annoyed, or even disgusted. I was focused, cold, controlled. If they wanted to turn my pond into a backdrop for their show, I was going to give them a show. I spent the next 2 days walking the perimeter of my land, documenting every trace of trash I could still find: broken siding, twine, rusted nails, a bent Home Depot bucket with concrete residue. I photographed, labeled, and bagged each item. I cataloged every find like it was evidence in a court case. Because in a way, it was. They'd used my land like a landfill, and now they wanted to pretend it was part of their curated aesthetic. They'd dump, deny, deflect, then decorate. It was classic HOA behavior. Bury the rot under a fresh coat of beige and call it community pride. But I wasn't going to shout or threaten or post angry rants online. That would just play into their narrative. No, if I was going to respond, I had to do it in a way they'd never forget. Something they couldn't ignore. Something poetic. That night, I mapped out the parking lot where the gala was being held. I measured the distance from their rented tent to the main entrance. I marked where the press table would be, where the catering van would park. I noted every camera they'd likely have stationed and every blind spot they'd overlook. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew where I'd do it. The next morning, I heard a voice outside. I stepped onto the porch to find Glenda herself standing just past the gate, holding a cappuccino in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She smiled like we were old friends. "Mr. Bennett," she said, voice honeyed and brittle, "I just wanted to thank you for your understanding. We're so pleased you'll be allowing the gala to take place nearby. It adds such character to the event." I stared at her for a long moment. I wasn't aware I had a choice. "Oh, well, of course, it's public land on our side." She gestured vaguely toward the road. "But having your pond as part of the view is just lovely. It really elevates the experience. We'll be placing some ambient lighting to reflect off the water. It's all very tasteful." "You do realize that's my property?" "Oh, certainly, we'll be careful not to cross the line. We're very respectful of boundaries." I didn't say anything. I just looked at the brownish water behind her. A dragonfly hovered over the surface, then darted off. Glenda cleared her throat. "Also, if I could make a small request, just for the evening, could you perhaps tidy up the shoreline a bit? Maybe remove the sign and that wooden structure near the edge, the rustic one?" "You mean the dock I built myself?" "Well, yes, it doesn't really match the theme of the event." I smiled. "What theme is that?" She tilted her head. "Elegance." I smiled wider. "No problem." Her smile faltered just slightly. She turned and left without another word. As her Audi pulled away, I walked down to the pond, looked at my dock, my murky shoreline, the scattered debris still half buried in the weeds, and started planning. Not to remove it, to return it. There's something deeply satisfying about sorting garbage. Not tossing it, not cleaning it. Sorting it. Like you're restoring order to chaos. Like every plastic shard and moldy board and rust-flecked screw has a story, and now you're giving it a proper ending. That's what I told myself anyway, as I stood in my workshop surrounded by the filth silver pines had dumped into my life, quite literally. I'd hauled it all up from the shoreline over 3 long days. Bags of crumbling insulation, broken PVC piping, cement chunks, waterlogged cardboard boxes that stank of mildew and regret. I spread everything out on tarps and folding tables, gloved and masked like I was working a forensic scene, because that's exactly what it was. Each piece I labeled with the date it was recovered, approximate GPS coordinates, and the type of material. I added laminated placards to the bigger items. Recovered from unauthorized dumping. Silver Pines Grounds Truck, Sept 12th, 3:45 p.m. HOA-related debris confirmed via HOA vendor registry. See photo evidence. I didn't need to go this far, but I wanted to. This wasn't revenge anymore, it was documentation, a display, an exhibit. On the morning before the gala, I rented a 16-foot moving truck from a place 2 towns over. Not the nearest location. I didn't want anyone local connecting the dots just yet. I paid cash. I wore sunglasses and a baseball cap. Not because I thought I'd get recognized, but because it felt appropriate. The truck sat behind my workshop overnight, backed into the far end of the gravel drive. I loaded everything after sunset. Each trash bag was carefully sealed and labeled. The broken boards were stacked neatly, lashed with rope. I even shrink-wrapped the busted tile and drywall pieces onto a wood pallet so it wouldn't fall apart in transit. A 6-foot PVC pipe stuck out awkwardly like the world's worst musical instrument. I labeled it too. I didn't sleep that night, not out of anxiety, just adrenaline. I hadn't felt this alive since the day I quit my corporate job and walked out without saying goodbye. I spent the early morning printing out the last touch. 20 copies of a 1-page flyer titled, "Truth Behind the Scenery." It included time-stamped photos, screenshots from my trail cams, county parcel maps, and a brief summary of the events leading up to this lovely lakeside gala. Nothing slanderous, just facts, presented like a museum handout. At exactly 9:30 a.m., I put on a clean flannel shirt, jeans, and steel-toe boots. I pulled the truck around, rolled down the windows, and took the back road that curved behind the HOA park. By 10:05, I was there, just as they were setting up. Their event tent was massive, ivory white with gold trim. Decorative archways lined the entrance, and tables covered in satin cloth gleamed in the sun. I saw caterers unpacking trays from a black van and a rental crew adjusting uplights aimed squarely at my pond. My pond, still murky and recovering. The HOA president herself, Glenda Mason, was standing near the entrance in a navy blue blazer and heels far too sharp for grass. She was directing volunteers like a general prepping for war. She didn't see me, yet. I parked the truck next to the curb outside the event zone, still within legal limits right on public ground. I'd done my homework. This patch of grass near the park's entry was county maintained. No signs forbade parking, no restrictions on unloading. This would be a fully legal operation. I opened the back of the truck and began carefully placing the items in a row. First, the pallet of broken drywall and tile. I set it just left of the archway, slightly off-center from the tent's entrance. I leaned the first placard against it. Then the black contractor bags, stacked in a pyramid like a forgotten monument. Then the labeled wood, the insulation, the busted pipe. All of it lined up like grotesque decorations for a dystopian garden party. By the time I was arranging the final items, people had started to notice. A volunteer approached, a college-aged guy with a clipboard. His voice was hesitant. Sir, are you with the event?" "In a way," I said. I handed him one of the flyers. He blinked, read, blinked again. "I think I should get Ms. Mason." "You do that." I kept working. I placed the last two items, the ripped garbage bags that had spilled into the pond, and taped them shut. One of them still smelled faintly of old wet paint and grilled meat. I made sure that one was closest to the media table. That's when I heard her voice. "Excuse me, what is this?" Glenda's heels stabbed the ground as she marched up, red-faced and rigid. "This," I said calmly, "is the trash your HOA dumped on my land. Return to sender." Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Her eyes scanned the labels, the flyers, the neat rows of garbage lined up in front of her polished gala entrance like protest art. You can't just... This is a community event." "Yep, and I'm part of the community, or at least I was when you were using my property as a landfill." "This is slander." "Nothing here is untrue," I said. "There are timestamps, satellite overlays, environmental reports, all public record. I've already submitted copies to the county." A man with a camera approached, one of the local news freelancers. He asked me if he could film the display. I smiled and gestured like a tour guide at a sculpture park. "Be my guest." By the time noon rolled around, the garbage display had outshone the tent. Guests arrived in suits and cocktail dresses, stepping around contractor bags and reading the placards with mounting disbelief. Someone called it conceptual performance art. Another person compared it to Banksy. I didn't correct them. Glenda was near tears. Her voice cracked as she tried to redirect traffic away from the mess, but it was too late. The scene had already gone viral. Someone live-streamed it on Facebook. The caption read, "HOA gala interrupted by local man's trash truth bomb." It got shared 6,000 times in 3 hours. I didn't stay long, just long enough to make sure the point had landed. Then I loaded back into the truck and drove off, windows down, cool October air on my face. I left the display exactly where it was. I didn't even make it halfway home before my phone started buzzing. Unknown number, then another. Then a text from Shelley, the county inspector. "Holy crap, is this your doing?" I didn't answer right away. I just pulled over, stepped out of the truck, and stood there on the shoulder of the road, watching the fields sway gently under the morning sun. The kind of peaceful moment I hadn't felt in weeks. I let it soak in. Back at home, I parked the truck beside the barn and walked straight to the dock. The water still looked sick, but something in me had settled. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a shift. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't lashed out. I had made them see. The first news clip hit by 3 p.m. Local ABC affiliate. A shaky video of the garbage lineup in front of the pristine gala tent. Voiceover narration full of barely concealed glee. Silver Pines HOA is under fire after a dramatic display of allegedly dumped construction waste appeared at their annual community gala. Local resident Zach Bennett claims the trash was left on his private property by HOA maintenance crews. They used my name, first and last. I guess I should have expected that. Within 24 hours, it spread. One of the neighborhood kids posted a TikTok montage with dramatic music and quick zooms on the laminated signs. Captioned, "When HOA tries to mess with the wrong pond guy." Hundreds of thousands of views. By the second morning, Dermarden Mason Trash Show was trending regionally. Someone had made a meme of Glenda's face photoshopped onto a raccoon digging through garbage bags. I didn't post a thing. I didn't have to. Instead, I met with my lawyer and handed over a full package of everything I'd compiled. Timestamps, video files, photos, environmental tests, parcel boundary documents, the works. He was already halfway through preparing a formal civil complaint. But we didn't even need to file it, because by the end of the week, Silver Pines HOA was imploding from the inside. It started with a resignation. One of the younger board members, Evan, 30-something, always looked like he'd rather be gaming than arguing about hedges, sent a mass email to residents. I can no longer serve on a board that prioritizes image over integrity. I witnessed firsthand the decision to offload materials near Mr. Bennett's property under the guise of land beautification. That was illegal, and I said so at the time. I regret not speaking up sooner. It wasn't just brave, it was a damn torpedo. The email got leaked to the press. The phrase land beautification turned into a sarcastic battle cry in the comment sections. 2 more board members followed within days. The HOA Facebook page shut down completely after someone posted screenshots of internal discussions. Allegedly, Glenda instructing the grounds crew to relocate unsightly debris to underused terrain across the boundary. That underused terrain being my land. They tried damage control. Glenda made a statement at the next HOA meeting, something about miscommunication and a regrettable misunderstanding with our vendor. I know this because someone recorded the entire meeting and uploaded it to YouTube. She looked tired, rattled, her usual icy poise replaced with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. I could have stopped there, but I didn't. Instead, I sent an official notice to the HOA attorney demanding full removal of any remaining debris, a formal written apology, and restitution for environmental restoration costs. I attached invoices from the pond cleanup crew and a detailed estimate from an aquatic ecologist who said it would take approximately 2 seasons and $15,000 to fully restore the damaged ecosystem. The attorney called me within 48 hours. Not to argue, but to ask if we could settle privately. I told them I'd consider it, after a public apology and full admission of responsibility. In writing, with names. They went quiet for a while after that. Meanwhile, things changed around the neighborhood. People who used to glare at me while walking their doodles now gave small nods or quick waves. One older woman even left a pie on my porch with a note. For the ducks, and for you too. The pond was still bruised but healing. And Glenda? Well, Glenda started fading. I heard from a friend in local real estate that she'd quietly withdrawn from an upcoming city council race. Apparently, the gala incident had turned off a few donors. Then came word she was stepping down as HOA president for personal reasons. No press conference, no final statement, just gone. The same woman who had once told me my house lacked aesthetic compatibility with community values now couldn't even show her face at Trader Joe's without people whispering. I didn't dance on her grave, but I won't lie. I enjoyed watching her fall from that high horse she'd ridden all over everyone. It's strange how quickly noise fades once the shouting stops. The calls slowed, the messages dried up, the articles moved down the feed. One week you're the lead story in a suburban scandal, and the next, people are sharing dog birthday parties and backyard drone footage again. That's fine. I wasn't in it for the fame, but the land remembered. The pond was still cloudy, although the surface had cleared some. More frogs had returned to the shallows. A family of ducks started nesting again near the western bank, probably the same pair from last year. I added fresh lily roots and restocked a few fish under the guidance of the ecologist. Restoration was slow, deliberate, and more satisfying than anything the HOA had ever managed. The garbage was long gone, hauled away after the HOA caved to my demands. They'd sent the apology. I had it framed, no joke, hung it right next to my deed on the wall in my workshop. It read like it had been chewed over by 10 lawyers, but the words were there. Responsibility, unauthorized dumping, regret, financial restitution. They paid the invoice, every dollar. And still I didn't gloat, not out loud, but inside, I was a symphony of petty satisfaction. Word around the neighborhood was that Glenda had sold her house, quiet listing, cash buyer, gone before Christmas. Her Audi disappeared from the driveway one day and never returned. No one cried about it. A few folks even seemed relieved. What surprised me, though, was how many people came by after. Some neighbors I'd never spoken to, middle-aged dads in golf polos, retired women with thermoses and gossip in their eyes, started stopping at the edge of my property asking polite questions. How'd you manage to get the HOA to pay up? Was it true you caught them on camera? Are you really not part of the subdivision? I answered what I wanted to, deflected the rest. Some of them weren't just curious, they were frustrated. Apparently, Glenda's reign hadn't been limited to my property line. One guy told me she fined him $300 for a non-conforming garden gnome. Another woman whispered that she'd been warned about excessive wind chime noise. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. They weren't looking at me like a nuisance anymore. They were looking at me like I'd cracked the code. I had a few cautious conversations with them over the fence. Well, over the natural hedge of wild-growing blackberry bramble I kept between my land and theirs. Some joked about forming a new HOA board, one with actual community input. A younger couple even asked me to help them write a formal motion to amend the bylaws. I told them I wasn't interested in HOA politics, but I'd help if they ever wanted to turn that park tent into a chicken coop just to spite the old rules. They laughed. So did I. But underneath I could feel something changing. What started as one HOA flexing its authority had unraveled into a reckoning. Not just about trash or ponds or bad taste in landscaping, but about control. About who gets to decide what community looks like. I didn't intend to be the guy who started a neighborhood revolution, but you let enough trash pile up and eventually someone has to take it out. One evening, as I was hauling firewood to the stack behind the cabin, I noticed a young man walking the edge of the tree line. Not close enough to be trespassing, just hovering near the boundary like he wasn't sure if he should approach. He looked familiar. I squinted. Evan? He turned. It was the former HOA board member who had sent that email, the one who'd resigned first. Didn't mean to bother you, he said. Just wanted to say thanks. Not a lot of people would have done what you did. I nodded. Most people just complain online. He laughed. Yeah, you turned it into performance art. We stood there in the dusk, not talking much. Eventually, he looked toward the water. You know, with her gone, they're going to be scrambling to restructure everything. I wouldn't be surprised if Silver Pines starts reaching out, asking for advice or help. Let's hope not, I said. But if they did? I thought about it. About the lies, the flyers, the dead fish. The way Glenda had tried to weaponize a fake smile and a clipboard. The way the system had cracked under the weight of its own smugness. If they do, I said, they better bring me pie first. The ducks don't care about politics. That's the first thing I thought when I stepped out onto the dock that morning and saw them gliding along the pond like royalty, leaving ripples in their wake. The water was clearer now, still not perfect but healing. I could finally see the rocks I'd lined along the bottom near the shore, the shadows of fish darting beneath the lily pads. The aerator hummed softly, a heartbeat beneath the surface. In the distance, laughter echoed. Kids were playing near the edge of the Silver Pines Park, just on the other side of the line. Not the invisible kind. No fences or signs, just a strip of trees and my very firm memory of what they once tried to dump here. But something was different now. A new banner had gone up on their side. Silver Pines Harvest Picnic. All neighbors welcome. Cute, I thought. No clipboards, no formal wear, no wine tasting or speeches, just folding chairs, hay bales, and a bounce house slowly inflating under the care of two overworked dads. I had no plans to go, but then I saw a woman walking toward my side cautiously. She was holding something round wrapped in foil. "Hey, Mr. Bennett," she called. "I brought you another pie." It was the same one who'd left the note weeks ago. This time, she wasn't sneaking. She walked straight up to the edge of my driveway and handed me the pie through the open gate. "Pumpkin," she said, "with bourbon, from scratch." I raised an eyebrow. "Trying to bribe me into coming to the picnic?" She grinned. "Maybe. We thought it might be nice if you came by. There's chili, and no HOA speeches this time, I promise. I don't eat chili from plastic bowls. We brought real bowls, ceramic." I gave her a long look. "Real spoons?" "Metal." I sighed like a man surrendering to fate. "Fine. But if someone starts talking about pond beautification again, I'm throwing them in." She smiled and walked off. I set the pie on the porch and changed into something resembling public-friendly clothes. As I walked down the gravel path toward the park, I noticed a new sign near the tree line. Not one of mine, not one of theirs. Something someone had carved into reclaimed wood and bolted to a post. Property line. Respect it. Enjoy it. Don't be a dick. Underneath it, in smaller letters, "Thanks, Zach." I stood there for a moment reading it. Then I laughed. The bounce house was up by the time I reached the clearing. Kids were screaming with joy. A teenager was manning a popcorn machine. Someone was tuning a guitar near the hay bales. And nobody, absolutely nobody, seemed to care that I once returned a mountain of garbage to this exact patch of grass in front of their previous queen bee. That's the thing about firestorms. They burn everything, but sometimes what grows afterward is healthier. People waved. They handed me cider. Someone handed me a plate. One guy even said, "Man, you really inspired me. I cleaned out my whole garage after your thing." My thing? Yeah. The art show. The trash installation? Iconic, man. Iconic. Christ. By late afternoon, I was sitting on a folding chair next to the duck pond, cider in one hand, pie in the other, listening to Evan, the ex-HOA board guy, tell a story about how Glenda once tried to fine someone for using a hammock without seasonal context. I wasn't sure what that meant. I wasn't sure he knew either. Someone lit a fire pit. Kids roasted marshmallows. A little girl wandered up to me and asked if she could feed the ducks. I handed her a cup of cracked corn I always kept in my jacket pocket and pointed her to the dock. "They like it slow," I told her. "Don't throw. Just let it fall." She nodded solemnly like I'd just shared ancient wisdom. The sun dipped low. The pond shimmered. No trash, no flyers, no damn clipboards. Just people, real ones, the kind who mess up and fix it, the kind who learn the hard way, the kind who sometimes need a pile of garbage shoved back in their faces to remember what matters. And me? I sat back in my chair, took a sip of warm cider, and listened to the ducks. They still didn't care about politics, but maybe, just maybe, the neighbors were learning.